Hello, and welcome back again to Maturing the Bride. We are again on Book 5. We're looking at the difference between grace versus works. We've gone over a bunch of chapters. We learned in chapter 1 that there is a huge difference between having your name recorded in heaven and being rewarded in heaven. In chapter 2, we said, can Christians lose their inheritance? And we discovered absolutely yes. We can lose our inheritance based on how we live our lives. In chapter 3, we said, are rewards central in the teaching of Jesus? And we looked at the Sermon on the Mount and we realized Jesus never called us simply to be children of God. He constantly called us to be workers, disciples, or friends of His, obeying Him. Then we went to chapter 4 and we discovered that there are two key reasons why Christ came to the earth. We found out that the first reason why Christ came was this: to glorify God by restoring all things. But then we found, hey, wait, there's a second key reason. And that second reason was this: He came to demonstrate that a life lived well will be rewarded well. And then in chapter 5, how different will our rewards be? We looked at 10 passages and found out there will be major differences in heaven. So now we get to chapter 6. How what you do today determines your forever. You may not know the name Matthew Emmons, but he was an Olympian in 2004, represented the United States. He's an accountant by trade. But he was loved shooting and going for a medal, and he was just one shot short of getting the gold. He just needed a mediocre shot, and he was excellent, so he was kind of a shoo-in to get the gold. And as he was shooting, he needed to shoot at this target over here and just get it. So he made the shot, took it, and got almost complete bullseye. He was well within his needed to get the gold. But when he looked at his score, he found out it was a 0. And he said, what? A 0? He found out that he had been shooting the wrong target. He aimed at the wrong target. As a result, he lost the gold, he lost the silver, and he lost the bronze. Men and women, we have two targets to shoot at. Are we going to live for the 80 years that we live on this earth, or are we going to live for eternity? We said it in the last lecture, we're going to say it again, men and women, 99.999999999999% of our existence happens after we die. The majority of our existence happens after we die, and we've got to ask the question, are we living for these 80 years or are we living for eternity? Jesus constantly challenged us to live for eternity. And He constantly challenged us that what we do here on this earth will change our eternity. Now, I want you to catch this perspective, and I want you to see this is why heaven is temporary. Temporary? Yeah, the heaven that my parents are in, and maybe your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, whatever, where people are in heaven right now is a temporary heaven. How do we know that? Well, we know it from the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 21, verse 1 says these words. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. There was a new heaven. That means the current heaven, what we call heaven right now, is temporary. It's just a temporary heaven. Why is heaven temporary? Well, it's very simple. God is making your home. He's preparing your house. He's preparing your mansion. He's got the blueprints for it. Some of us, He's got the studs up and He's got a finished product in mind. But it can change depending upon how we live our lives on this earth. And if we don't finish strong, He's going to scrap it and say, no, let's start again. We've got to rebuild this a lot smaller. If we do things above and beyond, He's going to say, scrap it. We got to add to it. We got to make it bigger. We find this idea, this concept, the very concept that He's preparing a place for us in John chapter 14, verse 2. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, why would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? God, Jesus, is building a place for you and for me, and it all is dependent upon how we live our lives here on this earth. That's why the present heaven is temporary, because God is designing the permanent heaven based on how we live our lives on this earth. And in this heaven, we will have ownership. That's what Jesus teaches us. We will have ownership. In Luke chapter 16, we read these words. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. Okay, let's stop right there. Note the faithfulness part. There's a difference between faith and faithfulness. Faithfulness earns us rewards. Faith gets us into heaven. He's talking about faithfulness, being faithful. From the top, one who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? Which is your own? Yeah. What we get in heaven is going to be ours. It'll be given to us by God as a gift, as a reward. So you realize what that means. It means the car that you now drive is really God's car. He's the one who gave it to you. Yes, you might have earned it, but He gave you the power to do the work, to make it there. He gave you the job. That's really God's car. That house that you live in, God's home. Those clothes you wear, God's clothes. They're God's clothes. That living room, the TV, the lamps, the table, the chairs, all God's. All God's. Men and women, everything you and I own is God's. No wonder Paul writes to the Corinthians these words. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. The word steward is the manager of the household or of household affairs. God has made us stewards of His car, of His home, of everything that we think we own. But that's the problem. We act as if everything is ours, and it's not. God says, I've created everything. The whole world is mine. Everything belongs to God, but we're a steward of it. One day in heaven, it'll be ours. Right now, we're stewards. We're stewards. God says, I want to see how you do. I want to see how you do. I'm looking for a mature bride for my son. I want to see how you do. If you're faithful, I'll reward you. If you're not, it's going to be taken away. And Jesus says that some of us are acting like fools. We're acting like fools. In Matthew chapter 7, we read these words. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them, stop right there. Do them? Hey, that sounds works-oriented. Oh yeah, it is works-oriented. Why? Faith gets you into heaven, but works earn you rewards, and He's looking for a bride for His son, and just by getting into heaven doesn't guarantee you're going to be a part of the bride. And so He says, hey, I'm looking for a bride for my son. I want to see if you're going to do what I tell you to do. Let's look again, start at the top. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Great was the fall of it. Jesus says, if you don't live according to my words, if you don't do what I'm asking you to do down there on the earth, you're a fool. You're a fool. You're living a foolish life. He says it this way in Luke chapter 12. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And then he told them a parable saying, One's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. He's talking about a true life. He's talking about the 99.999% of life that you live. That's what he's talking about. And he says it doesn't consist in the possessions that you have because they're not yours to begin with. They're mine, says God. I'm just making you a steward over them. So he continues on with the parable. The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? Fool. God can call Christians fools? Yeah. They're living for their kingdom, not God's kingdom, and they're washing and wasting away all of their inheritance. It's going to be given to somebody else, and God says, that's foolish. What are you doing? Don't do that. And then he asks the question, whose will they be? And the answer is, duh, not yours. In other words, I wanted them to be yours. I wanted you to build eternal riches and treasures by the things I gave you so that you could give it away to the poor, so that you could build up for yourselves treasures in heaven. But now they're not going to be yours. They're going to be somebody else's. They're going to be somebody else's. And that's not what I wanted for you. That wasn't my game plan. That wasn't my intent. But it's going to work out that way. So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Men and women, do not lay up for yourselves treasures for yourself. Be rich toward God. Do what he tells us to do. Be kind to the internationals living around you. Be kind. Take care of the widows, the fatherless, the orphans, the homeless. Reach out to them. Bless them. My wife and I recently heard of an Egyptian couple, husband and wife and a child, and the woman was pregnant, who were basically homeless. And so we said, come on in, live with us. They've been with us now for about 4 months. It's not our home. It's God's home. And we thought this would be a great way of honoring God. Men and women, we can live for ourselves. We can live for these 80 years, or we can be rich toward God. But I see most Christians choosing to live for themselves, and they're going to get little, if any, rewards. You don't want that. I don't want that for you. And listen, many people have been misled in how they understand John chapter 14, verse 2. I want to break down John chapter 14, verse 2 for you and help you to see it in a new light. It reads this way. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go and prepare a place to you? And if I go, I will prepare a place for you, and I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. Now, many people love the King James translation of it. It says these words, in my Father's house are many mansions. Yes! Ha ha! Mansions, baby! I've got a mansion in heaven. Jesus said he goes there to prepare a place for me. It's going to be so big. It's going to be like a resort. I'll have places for my friends and my guests. This is wonderful. It's a mansion, they think. And to do all of the extra hard works, to do the many works that are hard and difficult, you know what? It's just not worth it for the rewards. I mean, what, is my kitchen going to be a little bigger? Am I going to have one extra guest bedroom? I've already got plenty of guest bedrooms, I'm sure, if it's a mansion. So it's not that big of a deal. I don't have to do all these works. I don't really have to take seriously this idea of going to all the nations. I don't have to take seriously about being kind to the internationals living among you. I don't have to take seriously about taking care of the widows and looking after them. I've already got a mansion. Jesus is preparing it for me. I read it in the King James. Let's look and break down the 3 different words that he uses in John chapter 14. In the first one, in my Father's house, it's O-I-K-I-A, O-I-K-I-A. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'm not a Greek scholar. but it's an inhabited dwelling. So in my Father's inhabited dwelling. Well, where does our Father live? Where does he inhabit? Oh, yeah, let me think. Where does God dwell? God dwells in the universe. Yes. So John 14, verses 2 and 3 could accurately be translated this way. Throughout the universe where my Father dwells. Well, then he goes and says, there are many rooms. The Greek word for room is monē. It means a residence, a place to live, a place to dwell. So we could accurately be translating John 14, verses 2 and 3. Throughout the universe where my Father lives, I am preparing a residence for you. And then he goes and talks about preparing a place for you. It's a third word. This one is topos. And it has many different understandings, many different definitions to it. It could mean an inhabited city. I go and prepare an inhabited city for you. It could also mean the condition or station held by one in any company or assembly. In other words, it's an opportunity for power, an occasion for acting. Do you realize what Jesus could be saying? He could be saying this. Throughout the universe where my Father dwells, I am preparing a residence for you in a city or country where you will govern, rule, and reign with me. But not everybody gets it. Remember, the one who had one, it was taken away from him. So not everybody is going to have this place designed for them to the max. They might get something very, very small. And you don't want that. You don't want that. I was speaking to a local pastor once here in the Mechanicsville area, and I told him this about rewards, and I was new in this understanding. It was a couple years ago. And he said these words to me that shocked me. He said, Bob, let me just be honest with you. I think that most of the people in my church would be happy with a shack. They'd be happy with a shack. Yeah, they just want to get to heaven. And I left that meeting and I was just disturbed. I was just disturbed. They'd be happy with a shack long as they get to heaven? Some ways I guess I could understand that, but in other ways I was baffled. I didn't understand. Well, why would they just be happy with a shack? And then it dawned on me why they would not be happy. Because nobody likes having something stolen from them. Nobody likes having something stolen from them. And the one place that they were supposed to be ruling and reigning over will be taken away from them and given to somebody else. That's like having it stolen from them. What? Are you kidding me? You wanted me to have that city to rule and reign over, and I don't get to rule and reign over it? No. No, I'm sorry, you don't. You're going to give it to the other person? Yes, they were more faithful. But I'll be faithful now. I'm sorry, I gave you 80 years to show yourself, and you weren't faithful. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you. Men and women, in eternity past, God prepared a kingdom for you. Before He created you, He had a kingdom in mind He wanted you to rule and to reign over. It is designed for you, made for you, according to your likes, according to your personality, according to your strengths. God has it prepared for you. But it might be taken away. And He said to those who stood by it, take the mina from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. Nobody likes having something stolen from them. And you are not going to want to have it stolen from you on Judgment Day. That's why it's required that you be found faithful. Remember the difference between faith and faithfulness. He wants you faithful to earn your full reward, because what He's primarily looking for is a bride for His Son. But it could be stolen away. No wonder there are tears in heaven. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. I hear so many people say there'll be no more tears in heaven. That's not what the text says. He'll wipe away the tears, because there will be tears. Why? Because they lived their life for the 80 years. That's what their goal was. That's what their target was. They did everything to build up their 80 years so they could live a soft, comfortable, easy, happy, safe life, and they didn't invest in eternity. And they got zero rewards. They got zero rewards. They made it to heaven. They got a shack, but they got zero rewards. Men and women, let me speak truth to you. Live for eternity. Live for eternity. Die to these 80 years on this earth and say, I'm going to live for eternity. This house is God's. This car is God's. The work that I do it for God. Everything I do for His glory. I'm going to live for God. I'm going to live to make Him famous. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Men and women, the hard works that we do, giving our house, having people come and live in your home and partially take over your kitchen and cook strange foods that smells strange in your own kitchen. It's tough. It's a trial. It's tribulation. But the rewards far outweigh it. Far outweigh it. That's why Paul says this, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. It's not worth comparing it. Yeah, so you had some strange smells in your kitchen because someone from another country cooked something you've never thought of or heard of before. And it smells strange, but that's okay. That's okay. There's going to be rewards. And men and women, the rewards far outweigh any sacrifices we make. The rewards far outweigh any sacrifice we make on His behalf. He is a God who lavishes on us His grace and His rewards. So, let's review. I want you to know 99.99999999999% of your existence happens after you die. We will not all be the same. There will be major differences in our lives. And if you live for these 80 years, you're going to get zero rewards. You're going to live in a shack. What could have been a mansion, you're going to live in a shack. But if you lived for eternity, you're going to have a mansion. So I leave you with this thought. What are you shooting for? What's your target? Don't aim for the wrong target. Your day-to-day choices will affect your eternity. Your day-to-day choices will affect your eternity. Hope that was challenging. Hope it's helpful. In our next time together, I'm going to challenge you why you should and want to finish strong. Thank you for watching Maturing the Bride. Hi, I hope you have been enjoying Grace versus Works. As a friendly reminder, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our desire is to get this message out to as many people as possible, which means other nations and in other languages. If you'd love to help us out with that, we would really appreciate it. In fact, if you're fluent in another language and you want to translate these into that language, contact me. Let me know. I'd love to work with you on it. Or if you simply want to help us out financially, because we're already doing it in a few other nations in Africa, that would be a blessing as well. You can do that by going to www.givetoug.com. Thanks so much.